Hello, everyone, and welcome to Breakthroughs with Bree. On this podcast, we are discussing all of the topics that help us have breakthroughs on our personal and spiritual development journeys. My name is Bree, otherwise known as Healing with Bree, and I'm a channeler, energy healer, tarot reader, astrologer, and soul alignment coach. My mission in my work and in this podcast is to help teach people how to shift their consciousness, how to heal, and how to release beliefs and patterns and fears of their ego mind so that they can step into alignment with their soul to live lives of abundance, purpose, and bliss. In these episodes, I will be sharing either through my own lens and my own channel or through the experiences of my guest, wisdom and expertise about healing, spirituality, psychology, personal growth, holistic wellness, mysticism, consciousness, and so much more. My hope is that these conversations help you feel seen and provide support and inspiration for you with your own personal breakthroughs. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Breakthroughs with Bree. Today, we have a returning guest, one of my favorite people on this whole planet. She's an online nutrition, fitness, and mindset coach and the creator of the wildly successful program, Happy Hormones with Hannie. Welcome back to the podcast, Coach Hannie.
Thank you so much.
I feel like whenever we get to talk, it's just like a little hangout. So everybody listening just gets to hang out with us today, you know?
Yeah.
Well, we get to talk about one of our favorite things, which is cycle syncing, hormones, and really being our best, happiest selves. But before we get into that, just so everybody can be reminded about all of the fun little things about you in our rapid fire that we do with our guests. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay, so I'm going to have you start with your pronouns and where you are located in the world.
She, her in Sacramento, California.
Love, another California queen. And tell us your big three in astrology.
Okay. Aries, moon. And then, wait, sun. Aquarius. Listen, I literally practiced this too, and I was like, it's not even hard. There's only two. And then my rising.
It's not even hard.
I know. I think I got the nervous. I was like, what am I? It's like, okay, then the other two are Aquarius.
I just love how much you were like, I'm going to get this right, you know?
Then body said, yeah, right.
Aries, Sun, Aquarius, Moon, and Rising. And then for your human design, do you know your human design by chance?
I am a generator through and through.
Love. Generators are powerful. You guys got a important purpose on this earth, and that also makes sense with the Aries because the energies are very similar. Okay, your aura color, we were talking about this in the Flowmaster group. What do you suspect about your own aura color now that you've taken the quiz or you've learned a little about it?
Yeah, it was just funny because I loved how everybody in the group could just tap me and be like, she's probably a red. When I took the quiz, I was like, well, I mean, if they're saying red it is. And it was red. Okay, then that means, well, that was also good for me to see because it meant that I was really authentically myself and even just this short exchange. So it felt good to be cool. I like that. That felt good.
Oh, 100%. Reds are really funny because they really do have that just I'm putting myself out there and you can react and either like it or not like it, that's just their vibe. There's a little bit of a discussion about if you're blue or purple. I really think that you're blue. And I think that sometimes maybe people who are outgoing or have the ability to be outgoing in a certain situation, some people think might be purple, but I really think that you're blue. And I think your outgoingness is when it's your job and it's important and it's of service and it's helpful, you'll put it on. But I feel naturally, you probably don't mind, just kind of keeping to yourself in your circle. Do you know what I mean?
100%. You just read me to filth.
That's right. I did. Okay. So we think a red, blue. Do you want to share with everybody your life path numerology number?
She's a 5.
For anybody who has not listened, Hannie and I did a brilliant episode 4 on the importance of rest. And it was truly a fabulous episode channeled through a message while we were talking that had both of us on our asses. And just a really important topic. I explained that to say Hannie talks about her story of coming into this work of doing fitness and mindset training and coaching with people on that episode. I'm not going to ask her to repeat that this time, but instead, what I'm going to do is tell you to go back and listen to that episode and listen to her story because it's fabulous. And in this episode, I'd love to ask you, what are some of the favorite things that you are doing right now to help expand your own health and happy hormones?
The number one thing that comes to my head is just I'm learning about detachment. So, especially when it comes to like my business, that's been a really big one for me because I have found in the last year of going out on my own in my business that I tend to attach my self-worth with the numbers that are going on in my business. It's
Mm.
I have a really good month and I'm really good at what I do. If I don't bring in new clients, I'm like, nobody sees the value in me and blah, blah, blah. So I'm learning how to detach, but also instead of just like fully detaching, being like, I don't give a fuck, it's more like, okay, but what's actually going great in my life or in my business? The fact that I have this many clients, the fact that clients come back and say, you've changed my life in this way or that way. So I think just for my own health and my own relationship with my business and myself, it's like detaching from like these arbitrary numbers and more so focusing on like how I actually feel in my business. And then something that secondary comes to that is I call them slowdown moments where I always say like none of us ever, women, men, whatever, never stop in a day and say, what do I need? How am I feeling? But then also then acting on it. Because so often you catch yourself saying, I'll do it later, or I can do that this weekend when I have the time, or maybe next month when it's a little bit free, whatever. And it really should just be this quick, even just like if you have 1 minute of your day to just be like, let's slow the hell down and ask myself, like, what am I feeling? What do I need? What is my body asking of me? And then creating like a small little action step and then doing it or planning it for that day. And that could literally mean like going to sleep a little bit earlier or getting a nice meal in or moving your body. It doesn't have to be this grandiose thing, but like, I think it's really important to really just check in with yourself because I think a lot of us are extremely disconnected to our bodies, but we have these dreams. We're dreamers. We want to do so much, but we can never get there if we're not like, hello, like everything okay here? I think those are like my two main things is just like currently like in this season, I'm really focusing on detaching and slowing down.
And I just want to say too that I love the approach that you're even taking to the business. And this is something that I think applies for anybody. Like we have to catch ourselves on what we're hinging our peace and happiness on, right? Like what are we making our happiness and peace contingent on outside of us? And can we just start with being aware? Like we can just start there, right? And can we start to imagine what it might be like if we could still give ourselves peace and happiness, regardless of how that external thing is or isn't going? I know in Flowmaster, and the module that we just did within there was about self-worth and how our self-worth is not tied to our actions and not tied to performance and why we think that it is and all that kind of stuff, which has been really wonderful to talk with people about. So you can do that kind of work if that's something that feels really called to you. But at the very least, starting to observe and starting to be like, how could that be different can create so much peace in our lives. It can alleviate so much stress. And I know from your content on Instagram at Hannie Fit, if anybody's interested, you talk a lot about the importance of managing your own stress if you want to see better health results. So I love that you're putting that in practice. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the magic of our cycles, the magic of cycle syncing, and finding happy hormones, making our hormones very happy within ourselves with Coach Hannie. We are back, and we're back to talk about how to make happy hormones within ourselves and also how to sync with our magical cycles and feel like a synergy with our own energy. I'm curious if you would give us an idea of what it looks like to start finding more harmony with our hormones.
Yeah. So I think a big piece of this that it starts with like women not being connected with themselves. I think a lot of us are so disconnected. Like you hear terms flying out like, listen to your body. She tells you a lot. But then a lot of that also boils down to like, what does that even mean? Like, what does that look like? Or what does that feel like? And it essentially boils down to this idea of like body literacy, that your body like knows how to communicate with you. It has its own like language. You just need to learn what it's saying or what that language is so that you can make really empowered decisions for your health. So it's not to say that you get to a point where like you always make the best decisions for yourself and you're always doing the healthiest thing and the best thing, but it's just being more in tune with if your body's asking for something, you're going to have like so many tools in your belt to say, she responds really well to this. If I'm feeling this, I have 3 different things that I can try that will make me feel better. Or if I need rest, there's 3 different ways that I know how to address this and answer to this. So when we're talking about hormonal harmony, I think a majority of that really just means like you're really in sync with yourself in a sense of, so we know that throughout our cycle, we technically have 4 different phases. So you have your menstrual, then follicular, then you ovulate, and then you have your luteal phase. So the first part of your cycle is actually called the follicular phase. It includes your menstrual cycle because the menstrual cycle starts it off. Like the first day of full bleeding is essentially the start of the follicular phase. And then as we progress to that, we get to ovulation, which is the time of the month where you're probably feeling flirty, fun, and sexy because your body is like, hey, we're prepared for pregnancy, babes. Like this is what and then you move towards your luteal, and then you might drop in some energy. But in learning more about your cycle and your body and your hormones, you're leveraging that you're gonna feel, not you're going to feel. I always say being aware about your cycle is really important, but I want you to work with your symptoms rather than creating new ones. So what I mean by that is when we talk about the different phases that we can feel this type of way during this phase, we might feel this way, not to say, oh God, I know when I hit day, blah, 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 I'm going to feel like this. I'm going to act like this. I'm going to lean into that rather than, no, hold on. What am I actually feeling and how can I address it and support it? So I think a big part of like hormonal harmony just means like when you have and flow through certain cycles, you are so in tune with your body that you know typically this is a pattern that I might experience, and this feels really good when this kind of happens, and this is how I move through my life professionally or personally to support myself during this phase of the cycle, so that we're working with your body and not against it. I think some women are kind of have some idea of like what that feels like, but I think in general it doesn't feel like this like enlightening thing that like your whole life changes. It's more so just to add to your toolbox of what can feel good for your body.
I love that. Yeah, what I'm even feeling, I'm connected to my guides. I feel like they're going to chime in with some things to say about this today, which is really fun. But what I'm hearing you saying too is that sometimes our expectation of how we think our body should feel can actually be what's creating issues when
Mhm.
our body is feeling some way that's very different than that. And again, I know I can say from personal experience, for some reason, and I'm sure there's actually a lot of reasons why I felt this. I had this expectation that my body should always be feeling high energy, that I should always be feeling like $1 million, right? And anytime I didn't feel high energy and like $1 million, that meant something was wrong, like that was a bad thing, right? That I had done something wrong, like that was like the place that it would go. Whereas when you get more information, because I feel like information can be so empowering in the right situations. When we get information about the way that our body and our cycles work, we can actually acknowledge that there is a natural peak to how certain symptoms tend to feel for people, and then there's also a lull that has its own power, but also tends to be a trend for menstruating bodies through that time of the cycle. And how can we find purpose? How can we find impact in each one of those cycles and not like get down on ourselves or psych ourselves out or even like resist those experiences that creates more of the problems that we don't want?
Yeah. Or even the opposite of that. If you're constantly low energy and you never find this light, then it can be the opposite where you're just like, some people just accept it and they're just like, this is what my body is. Nothing changes. It is what it like. I just have to accept it, when that's not the case. Like that's an area for you to get curious. Like, again, why throughout my entire cycle do I not feel okay? Why don't I get a surge of energy? What's happening in my body? Because your cycle, I always say it's like your fifth vital sign. Like aside from blood pressure and oxygen, whatever, your cycle tells you a lot about what's going on internally. So if you're having these like long and painful periods and or long times between your 2 cycles, or it's super short, that's your cue to be like, something's up in our body.
Tell us a little bit more about this, because something that I know I grew up hearing and seeing and experiencing was that like heavy or painful periods was just normal. Some people just had them and some people didn't. Hannie, as our resident expert, is really painful and heavy periods normal?
No, literally no. And it's crazy to hear that and be like, you're lying. Like you're probably lying, because you get women who've gone their entire lives, we're talking then 20s, 30s, 40s, then transitioning to menopause or perimenopause and being like, I mean, that was just my life. Like it was normal because every other woman said the same thing, that they experienced the same thing. And then I get clients who, I love that I just posted about it the other day, but like she had mentioned, like it's been over 10 years of painful periods. And the last period I got, I didn't feel a damn thing. I didn't feel a damn thing. which essentially should be everybody's experience. And I don't want to negate anybody's like experience as like, it can be fixed overnight. It can't. There's so many things that can affect your cycles. And I don't want to say like you're doing something wrong that is affecting it or anything. But I think it's very empowering to better understand what a cycle should look like and feel like, and understand like how do you track certain things to know that you're having a healthy cycle or not. But yeah, extremely painful periods is just not the go. It's not normal.
100%. And I want to share my personal experience of this to really anchor this in for everybody. I had the most painful and heavy periods like my whole life. And I thought that was normal because my mom, she had that too. And her mom, she had that too. So, like, you hear that, you get your sort of period kind of stuff and you inherit that kind of whatever it looks like from your mother. Right. So here I thought that was normal. I had cramps so bad, sometimes it would make me throw up. I would be in fetal position on the couch, not being able to do anything. Like, legitimately, no matter where I am, would have to stop and like lean over and like, ooh, like they'd be so, so bad. I, for the last couple years, have really devoted to changing my nutrition, to changing the things that I'm eating. For me, I eat with as many plants as I could possibly get in my diet. Like, that is my number one goal. How many nutrients, like from the ground nutrients, can I give my body? I try to eat as much plant-based as possible. I tend to eat a much more healthier diet. Like, when I focus on being plant-based, I eat a little bit of meat here and there. I focus on getting a lot of protein, but like, how can I be like have as diverse amount of plants in my diet as possible? And I feel like that's really helped sort of like detox some things from my body, just giving it the nourishment that it needs to do those cycles without adding in anything extra that it's got to be doing. Focusing on, coming out of that stress response, starting to get in some like regular movement. And let me tell you, I have not had a really painful period in probably a year. They still can be a little bit on the heavy side, but much less than they were, and they don't go on as long. Like, I have so much more of an easy cycle after making kind of simple changes and realizing that I was not cursed with having that kind of cycle my whole life. So I just want to, like, from a firsthand experience, demonstrate how true it is that that is a signal that there is some sort of imbalance, that there is something going on, and that pretty simple changes can absolutely get us back on track and in a place where we're feeling a lot more ease in all of those areas.
Yeah. And I love that you bring up, it's kind of like hard, like you're kind of like, no, it was simple. Like some of us are like scared to say it was simple, but it really does boil down to your foundations. And I love that you bring up like when people, or you even thought yourself that you needed to try harder, or like, why wasn't it just working for you?
Mm-hmm.
But that really did prompt you to like dig a little deeper instead of saying, what's the next thing I can try? It's more so reconnect with your body and say,
Mm-hmm.
what feels good? What
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel good for me? Because I think at the baseline of it, whether it's health, fitness, professional life, if you don't have that connection with your body, you're never going to figure out what actually works. It's not that you need to try harder. We're all trying hard enough. We're all showing up for ourselves. It's not like we
Yes.
every day and choose to say, fuck our bodies and our brain.
Yeah.
It's the opposite in that how can we actually just work with our body in that day or in that
Mm-hmm.
moment, instead of like, let's just grind it and push it and push it. Because what we're finding, and that's exactly what like the kind of women I work with, is that we think we need to do more. It's this idea that like eat less, move more, and like everything's going to be fixed. I'm like, no. Address your head. What's going on up there? What's your relationship with food like? What's your relationship with fitness like? What's your relationship with yourself like? And it really does open up the door for you to recognize, wow, a lot of this is a lot more simple, though it's not easy work. It's going to be a little tough, a little uncomfortable. But it really is important to really dive in and get curious rather than to do the opposite of just like judging and the guilt and all that, because it doesn't serve you to do that.
Mm. And I tell people too who are trying to develop like their intuition more too, or even trying to live more authentically, like all of that is in your body, all of it. That, like, where is my intuitive signals coming from? Where can I know like what is right for me? Because I get a lot of clients who are really starting to do that, but they're like, I don't even know what I want. Like, the answers are in your body. Your body will tell you very clearly what you like, what you don't like, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. But you have to come back into connection with it, into its signals, and you have to start honoring what it's telling you. When it's saying you need to sleep more, or you need more quality of sleep because you feel like a crazy person, which is normal, like you got to do that, right? Or like when you feel thirsty, or when you're feeling like you're having a stomach ache and really bloated after eating food, like, like when you feel like your heart is like pumping out of your chest for like 5 hours after you drink coffee, like these are all little signals that your body is trying to tell you about what's taking you off of your center, what's taking you out of your balance, and will impact things like your cycle. That's my 2 cents on that.
And I love it because like when you bring up intuition too, like so many people will ask me like, Hannie, like you're such a good this person, that person. Like, how do you trust your gut? How is your intuition so good? And I was like, it's because I've opened myself up to be like to receive the signals, to like literally slow down and be like, my body just told me something. That thing is not for me, or that choice is not going to be really good for me right now. And it's not to say like you can't get there. You can, we're talking about it right now. Once you open up, I think again, we always talk about, or I always talk about too, about like people who they're always dreaming about something, yet they're just so closed off to be able to actually get the signs and signals that you need to get there. And then you think nothing ever happens for me. Woe is me. No, woe is you need to get together here and like address what's going on so that
Yeah.
you can open up and be able to receive and be able to get these signals. Because it's not like I was just like forever, I've always been good at my intuition, or my gut's been really good to me, but there's been times where I know that I haven't listened to my gut, or I close off because I'm too busy focusing on things that do not serve me, or I'm closing myself off to it. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not something that just happens overnight.
Mm-hmm.
You open yourself up,
Yeah.
it will show you the way.
The body's got a lot of answers for sure. Um, okay, the guides felt like they were dropping in something about the hormonal fluctuations for women and some of the purpose in them. Okay, this is from the guides. Women's bodies, menstruating bodies. We understand that there are some labels around this that don't work for everybody, so we just share them with these labels for the sake of clarity. Women's bodies have a really powerful creative potential. They have a very high sensory input, which gives them more information, more energy to work with when they're creating. And they have the ability to create a lot of magnetism and a lot of momentum. In order to generate such potency, there has to be, they're showing me like a recoup period. Like it builds up and it's really strong, and then it cycles down, it comes around, it builds up, it's really strong, it cycles down, and it's around. So they're saying part of the creation process is something that I actually just talked about recently on an episode. Part of the creation process is that there has to be destruction. Like you cannot have birth without death. You cannot have creation without destruction. This is a universal physical law. And part of women's ability to create, and this is one, create life and, bearing children and having children if that's what you choose. But women have the ability to create much more than that too. They have the ability to manifest and create incredible physical and material outcomes as well. In their process and ability to create, their bodies also must hold the energy of destruction of and of death, of endings. They have to hold both parts of this cycle to be able to tap into any one of them. Oh, that feels deep. That feels so wise. What else did you want us to know about this? Women and souls that choose to incarnate into women's body have a really deep lesson tied to surrender and tied to sensing things, being able to sense at what point in that death and rebirth cycle you're in, and surrendering to the magic that it's bringing you, because every single point in that cycle has purpose. Every single point in that cycle has magic. And women's bodies, and therefore the spirit of women, since they're having the opportunity to experience physically and from a sensory perspective, all of that, have the ability to gain a lot of wisdom firsthand from experiencing that cycle over and over and over again, and the ability to create great momentum again, in their ability to create really profound things on the earth, in their life, in their experience, by being able to ride this wave. They're saying that this does mean that there are certain vulnerabilities that happen, that our immune system, that our energetic fields do have times where they're more porous, or you could say that they are more vulnerable, where they come down in sort of like a depressed, slower moving, like a vibrationally slower moving time. And then they build up and they're vibrating very quickly, and again become very radiant and magnetic. Like our cells in our body and the different functions of it have all of those stages. And in the same way that you would appropriately dress for a certain event if you knew the weather was hot or the weather was cold, you have to sort of appropriately move through life given the state that your body is in. So if you know that your body is in more of a sensitive and slower moving and porous state, what kind of actions would you take to keep yourself safe or to keep yourself feeling good? You might be a little bit more selective around people that you're around and energy that you expose yourself to, activities that you participate in, things that you eat, knowing that your body is going to respond to those things different in those really sensitive times. I'm seeing particularly around that menstruation and like end luteal phase when things are kind of powering down. Whereas when your energy is vibrating really high, what can you do to support that? What can you do to tap into the energy of that? What can you do to let that energy flow as opposed to block it and create frustration or having it be directed in places that don't serve you? How can you let the flow of that support what you're trying to create in your health and honor that stage just as much as you honor a stage where things feel more sensitive? What are you doing with information you get at different stages? How are you letting yourself process and interpret those things in different ways? Yeah, they're saying there's just a lot of wisdom in how we can honor that whole process from a spiritual and energetic perspective, because that's what's manifesting for us physically. Yeah, and they're saying on that note, with some of the physical stuff that I was talking about, all bodies are taking in a lot of, they say, energy that was not always intended for our bodies to take in, right? And this is both in information, social media, any type of media in general, being around so many people and so stimulated. This is also in things that we've chosen to put in food that our bodies were not necessarily designed to be processing, and then it can take more effort to have those move out of the system and keep us healthy, right? Like there's a lot that we're taking in that we weren't originally designed for. And again, women's bodies have the gift of being highly sensitive, but also highly powerful. And our cycle reflects what we have absorbed through the ebb and flow. Like our menstruation is like a very acute symptom, as the coach says, vital sign to demonstrate what we have absorbed through that cycle, and the intensity of which that happens can show the extremes of what we've taken in and how you could say out of balance or out of harmony we might have been with what our body had capacity for. Yeah, they're saying there's like a lot of volatile energy in places of the earth. And if you're not careful, then your own cycle can represent like the volatility that's happening. For anybody that's listening, I just want you to take a big deep breath. It feels like they're moving some energy through us on this topic. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna get emotional. They're saying in starting to learn about your body and honor your cycle is to love your womanhood. It's to love your femininity, like energetically, like the divine feminine. It's to start to like love and value women as a collective. And there is more love and true like value for that energy that is needed in your society. And like women can feel that deeply. Yeah, they're saying almost to like inject the collective with more respect for women, for more love for women, for more love and valuing what the divine feminine energy has to bring into the world. You can start that wave by respecting your own body and respecting the cycles of your body and respecting the process that you go through in order to embody the magic of that energy. Whoa.
I got hit with so many different like whoosh.
Ooh, it feels like there was a healing that happened there. There was like an activation and healing that happened, I know, for me. And I feel like that's also going to be for listeners who receive that as well. What are your thoughts about that, Hannie?
The thing that hit me the most was that like respect for your body, because I think so many women, as beautiful as it is to be a woman, like I love being a woman. I know that there's been too many instances where I've caught myself saying, because of this, I hate being a woman. Because I experienced this, I wish it was different. So when I hear like respect your body or respect the menstrual cycle, I think that was a big one too, where I think you get that the narrative around your menstrual cycle as this very negative thing that like every woman just has to deal with it once a month. You do it for literally a huge chunk of your life. It's this negative experience where you're bleeding, you're in pain, you're in low energy, you're irritable. And then everybody around you agrees and they say, yeah, it's the fucking worst time of my life. Like every month I'm literally not living, whatever. Right. And then it forces you to be like, I hate this part about myself. I hate that I have to experience this. But when you bring up the part about how do we respect that piece of us, like that's like, yeah, because a part of what our cycle is, we are taught that your cycle is just when you bleed and that when you're irritable. And then when boys get to say like, oh, are you on your period? Are you bitchy because you're on your period? And we've been taught to believe like that is what our cycle is. And it's not. It's this beautiful thing where our bodies are working to create life. This whole cycle allows us the opportunity to create. And like you say, so if I'm going to say, I hate this part about me, yet it does this beautifully amazing thing, why would I ever hate that part of my cycle? Why wouldn't I instead say I might feel a little bit different, but that's just something my body needs to feel and go through in order to have this beautiful thing down the line of creating life, creating energy, creating new things. So I love the idea of just respecting our body instead of seeing it as this like, fuck, another fucking period. Like, and now I'm just like, yeah, another cycle. Let's get into it. How do I this? How do I feel good in this? Like, what about these phases of my cycle? How can I leverage making my body myself? And how can I connect with myself? And I think it was just like the biggest thing for you to say, respect. Like that, just like,
Yeah, I feel like our loathing of our own body when we're menstruating is really an internalized misogyny. And I think it can be really beautiful if we start to decide to have a perspective shift on what our body is able to do and what that offers us. Because I don't think we've ever been taught about it that way, you know? And even hearing the guides just now say that you're accessing sacred energy of death and cleansing, and you're accessing sacred energy of literally creating life. Like, if let's just say there was an imaginary world where nobody was having any cycles and somebody said, hey, you could literally tap into some of the most magical powers of the universe, like the physical powers, and you could tap into portals of letting things go and clearing them, and also literally bringing into this realm other life. Like, would you be down? Like, would you want to do that? And be like, heck yeah, let's do it, right? Like that would be this body that we have as women who are menstruating. And again, that doesn't have to be creating children. If you don't want to have children, that can be anything, but our ability to access that is fantastic and phenomenal. Phenomenal. There's so much power that we can be tapping into at those times that we aren't even considering because we're so busy complaining and hating and loathing something that in it can be a gift to us. It can be. Okay, to finish out the episode, let's talk a little bit about the characteristics of each part of the menstrual cycle, some characteristics of its energy, getting a little bit of an education if we've never heard of this concept before, and talk about what we can be doing in each one of those phases to, like we said, respect the phase and to tap into its full potential and its full magic.
So I love that the cycle starts with your menstrual cycle, because now we are going to take back the power or like respect ourselves during this phase instead of, okay, of course, not of course, but we can feel things like a little bit of moodiness, a little bit of lower energy, more sensitivity to pain right in the beginning while you're menstruating. But instead of like leaning into that like very negative idea or, description that we give to our cycles of you're bitchy and you're just low energy, you got to be lazy, blah, blah. I would like to say go inward, connect with yourself during this time. Like think about journaling, think about feeling about like reflection, calm, connected. How beautiful is it to say I'm connected to myself more when I'm menstruating instead of all of the negative things that typically will come with it.
So I was just gonna say I wanted to connect the menstrual cycle with the lunar cycles because I feel like our like witchy friends here kind of understand that too. So this could be a good way to understand it. Some people would think about the menstrual cycle as the end, but I actually love thinking about it as the beginning because it is the death and release of that last part of your cycle that creates the space for something new to be created. So it really is the new beginning. It is the setup to a whole new cycle, that process of menstruating. And it is very similar to new moon energy. When our moon and our sun are aligned in the sky, when our emotional, intuitive center is aligned with what we're aware of, what we're conscious of, like our mental vitality, when those are at the same place in the sky and super connected, it's like we have a portal of being super connected with ourselves and how we feel to get inspiration, to get clarity about what we really want to create in this next cycle, in these next 30-ish days of the moon cycle, which is very, very reflected in, the women's cycle. And so there's a lot of similarities between the time when a woman's menstruating and the energy of that, the potential of that, and also the potential of something like a new moon.
Yeah. And I love that you bring that up about this is the time for setting new goals, like professionally and in health. I'll give you two different ideas, like what you can focus on. So like as a woman in business or even a professional, like if you have a job, this is when I'm thinking about doing a little bit less demanding work. It's more of like the admin stuff. It's setting goals. It's thinking about the next upcoming weeks, because like you said, it's like the new beginning. It's like creation of like, let's start thinking about those things. And then with self-care, it's like maybe pulling back and prioritizing rest and relaxation so that you are opening up to new creation. So I think like that's a beautiful way to say like it's the menstrual cycle is your beginning.
100%. And I'll just say too, and if you've heard my podcast a lot, you've heard me say this before, sensitivity is simply receiving more information, receiving greater quality information, receiving greater quantity of you're literally sensing more intensely. So being more sensitive during that part of our cycle means that you have the opportunity to take in way more information than the average person. That is a gift. Use that, be intentional with that, so that it's helping support whatever you're wanting to create for your life. So, start of it, menstruation. Beautiful. We're relaxed, we're chilled, we're listening to our body, we're listening to the information that's coming in, we're connecting with ourselves, getting clarity. What is the next part of our cycle and phase after this?
Yeah. So as you complete the cycle, you're actually like finishing out your follicular phase. So when you're finishing out the bleed, you'll probably start to notice like that energy is starting to rise again. So I think the theme of your follicular phase or end follicular is newer things, like being a little bit more adventurous, being a little bit more creative. So it's very similar when it comes to like business tasks that I say, okay, I thought about planning the task during like menstrual and follicular, I'm like, okay, look, time to initiate, time to plan, time to strategize. When it comes to like content creation for me, it's like I'm starting to create the content, but I'm not really face to camera just yet. I'm just initiating some things that'll help it. And then when it comes to your health and wellness, it's like because you have this surge of energy, it's like, okay, I can pick up the pace a little bit. I can go a little bit, I can train a little bit harder. I have a little bit more energy. So again, it's like as we move, it's like new, like this energy rise. It's like doing activities that really boost your mood and your creativity.
So this part of your cycle has a connection with the first quarter moon. So for again, thinking about the lunar cycle, the moon and the sun are at the same spot in the sky, which is a new moon. Then the moon starts to move and it's 90 degrees away from the sun. That's like the waxing phase of the moon, that first quarter moon. And what's associated with that is like if you're setting an intention or you're trying to create something, that first 90 degrees is the point where you're really deciding, is this working and am I putting it into action? If there's like problems to solve, you're problem solving and you're making progress, you're creating momentum, you're really starting to initiate with that physical choice, with that physical action. And that makes a lot of sense in our periods that would be supported by an uptick of physical energy and physical resources to really start enacting what we've set our potential to. There might be like a little bit of friction coming out of that slow and like restful stage, but that can also be supported by like a little boost of like energy, especially if we're really aligned in our intention, right? And we're really moving past that, like almost like rounding a corner to what our intention is and to our creative potential for the month in that first quarter moon, the waxing phase of the moon, that first quarter. So what's next for us? What's our next part of our cycle, Hannie?
The best freaking part of the cycle, or at least for me, it's ovulation, baby. And your body and you are going to feel so flirty, so fun, so sexy because your body's trying to reproduce. It's trying to, create life. So during this phase, like I always say, I joke that like for all my smut girlies, and I'll like, this is the time to lean into your I'm anesthesia of blah, blah, and you're trying new things with your partner and like doing all this stuff because it's
You're
so
feeling sexy, 100%.
but I think like even if it's not like within your personal life of like, sexual stuff, it's like leveraging that like surge of energy or that surge of like confidence to do things. So like in my professional life, this is when I'm like, if I'm looking at my calendar, I'm like, this week I'm gonna be ovulating. This means presentations. This means pitches. This means like networking and collaborating with others, because I'm more than likely going to put my best self. I'm going to feel really good. I'm going to be able to, eloquently say what I do or feel really good about what I do. Content creation wise, on face to camera, you're going to see me in all my glory. And then with health and wellness, we recognize that in the opposite is kind of like when actually PMS like symptoms potentially start to come into play right now. So it's kind of counterintuitive where you're just like more energy, but like PMS is probably starting. So again, that's where when we get to this place is like leveraging what our body actually feels and being able to respond to that. So we're thinking not necessarily training to failure or anything, but maybe pulling back just a little bit, right? Because if we're thinking about it, our body like physiologically is trying to do this thing where it's like using resources to create life. So if we're pushing it on like the physical thing, it's not really going to do what we want it to do, right? So like energetically, we're feeling really good, we're feeling really sexy and flirty, but like maybe physically, it might start to feel like a little bit of a tug and pull where we need to start to kind of slow down again.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, because it's almost like you don't want to overtax the resources. If you understand your body's resources are being directed towards one task, you're not going to be forcing a task that would require a majority of its resources because then you're overtaxing, you're overdrafting the bank account, so to speak, you know? So I think awareness of that. Obviously, ovulation is going to have connections and similarities to a full moon. A full moon is the culmination, is the climax of a creative cycle. It's when the moon and the sun are opposing each other in the sky. There's a little bit of tension there. Like there's a little bit of friction with them being directly opposed. When we're talking like simply of the lunar cycle, this can be a good thing. If your action and your intentions have been really aligned, it's the culmination of what you've been trying to create, right? Like start to see the rewards. The flower has bloomed at this point. Now, I will say, if things have been a little bit out of alignment, you're going to feel that most intensely on a full moon. I know for myself when I'm ovulating, yes, I can feel like I am like the baddest bee in all the land, but I also feel a little bit more assertive in that time to know what's not good for me. Like I had no nonsense during that time, like not even in a grumpy way, but like in a just like a absolutely not. Like that's not a thing. I'm
Yeah.
moving towards this, right? And full moons can also be a little bit notorious for like starting to see what's not working for you and releasing that. So the only thing that you're holding on to, the only thing you have focus on is what is working really well for you. And sometimes if our understanding isn't clear on that, then we start to feel some bumps in the road. You know what I mean? We start to feel a little wonky. So again, I wonder if that kind of connects with what you're talking about is like honor what's happening in that time. Like honor what your body's doing. And if you're trying to take away from that, if your actions are not in alignment with how your body's feeling and what it's telling you in that time, you're probably going to feel it most clearly fight you in that time because there's a lot of like strength of intention for what it's doing at that point in the cycle.
Yeah, and I love that you bring that piece to cycle syncing and cycle tracking. It's leveraging higher energy when you can, but also not leveraging so that you burn out, right? Because that's
Not
not
forcing.
working
Yeah.
with your, yeah, it's like people say, during your follicular, we have more energy, but that doesn't mean you then put everything on your plate and overfill your plate to say, I need to that's not leveraging your energy. That's actually against your cycle.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting if we go back to where we were at in menstruation, like what was our intention for this cycle? I think for women, again, it would be really interesting if people have never considered this, like let yourself work in 30-day cycles for a minute and see how that feels. Let that, or whatever your particular cycle length is, right? If you pick one thing that you're focusing on, instead of thinking that you have to do all the things in your follicular phase where you start to build a momentum of energy, let your energy be directed towards the thing that you decided you were going to focus on. Because if you get to ovulation and you're trying to do all the things and it's not the thing you decided to focus on, like it might start to feel a little bumpy. And another thing I know that you said too with the ovulation is that some people can experience symptoms that feel like PMS around ovulation and not everybody realizes that, like maybe some cramping, maybe even spotting for some people. Are there any other like telltale signs of ovulation that when we start to become more body literate, we can start to identify to know that we're in that stage?
Yeah. So like physiologically, so your cervical mucus can change in like texture and consistency and amount, temperature. So if you're checking your basal body temperature right after ovulation, your temperature actually spikes because progesterone, which is progestation, so the hormone that supports pregnancy,
Yeah.
is skyrocketing. So it's going to increase your temperature. So this is why I think it's important to track your cycles, because you're physiologically can track things to help you better understand. And also some women experience what is called middle schmerz, which is like the literal releasing of the egg. You can feel that. Like some women can feel a little twinge. And so that can help you be more in tune with like the actual physiological things that are going to help you be in tune with where am I actually at my cycle? And you're not just guessing like a numbers game, like around day. I think there's this common misconception that everybody ovulates around day 14 and da da da. And I've had it happen where somebody's like, "Oh, Hannie, you posted that you're ovulating. I'm on day 14 too." And I'm like, actually, I'm on day like 17, 18. I ovulate like a little bit later because I have a little bit of a longer cycle. And a lot of women don't know that because it's just like the base bare minimum things that we think are happening in our body when that's very important to track your cycles, and you can better know exactly where you're at in your cycle.
100%. And then even too, if you're trying to think about, women maybe feeling really empowered in their sexuality or their sexual activity and maybe trying to prevent pregnancy, one of the best ways that you can prevent pregnancy is knowing when you ovulate, because the chance of your egg being fertilized is literally only in that first 48 hours about, and like knowing what happens when sperm is in there and how long that can last. Like simple information about this can actually help you be very empowered in preventing pregnancy if that's something that you want. And it's your own understanding of your body that will help you do that, because exactly like you said, all women do not ovulate 14 days into their cycle. And in fact, the biggest variation is when you ovulate in relation to your menstrual, because after you ovulate, then it starts to get into clockwork a little bit. It's usually about 2 weeks after you ovulate that you get your period. Your period usually lasts about the same amount of time. Really, the only variable for women is how long the follicular phase is and at what point in the cycle they ovulate. Like that is the variable. So like learning and sensing when you ovulate gives you so much information about the uniqueness of your own cycle.
It was literally life-changing for me to track my cycles. And it's really sad because I would have never known that you could do that had it not been for social media. My doctor didn't tell me this. My mom probably didn't know this. My aunties never told me. Like the fact that a lot of us are placed on birth control at a very young age, it was like a rite of passage. Just be like, yeah, I'm on it too. And you don't, and like, we have women out there popping plan Bs left and right because we're thinking that we can get pregnant 365 days a year, which isn't true. It's only within your fertile window. Your egg is only fertile or healthy for literally 24 hours, but then you have that window of when like sperm can survive as well. But it's so empowering to know your own body to say, I'm cool as a cucumber right now. We can do whatever. But if I'm preventing around this time right now, I know my body, I know my temperature, I know blah, blah, blah. We got to do something. It's so empowering.
I love it so much. Okay. So we ovulate, and just as a little check-in too, even though the lunar cycles, I'm not saying that like you're going to have your menstrual period at the new moon and you're going to ovulate on a full moon. Everybody's is different, but just like connecting the energies is a way to understand them. Another thing that's different is that each phase of the moon is like set, right? So it's this many days from a new moon to a quarter moon. It's this many days and they're exact equal quarters. That is not how it works with our cycle. So like a quick summary, how long on average would like a menstrual cycle last for somebody, that first part of the phase?
So if you're thinking about it on like an average cycle, which is about 28 days, we say like around 1 to 14. So like the halfway point, like 14-ish days is menstrual through follicular. Ovulation is the middle of it. And then you finish out the last half of your cycle with the luteal phase.
Okay. So that can be very similar to the lunar cycle. Of course it is, right? That like halfway through is when the new moon is. But just so everybody knows that that's not always the thing for everybody. So we menstruate. I know my menstruation is like maybe 5 days, 6 days, right? It can be around a week for some people. Some people it's a couple of days. Some people it's longer, whatever it is for you. And then the time after you menstruate up until you ovulate is still folliculars. So all of the time between when you finish menstruation until you get to the ovulatory point is follicular. You're starting to feel good. You're starting to build some energy. Your body is revving up to be able to ovulate. You ovulate, and the ovulation period is only what, like 48 hours, 24 hours?
It's a quick turnaround.
24. Yeah.
But it's not to say like you only have one day of those feelings. It's like you have a period of like when you're looking at a chart of like where your hormones are cyclically like increasing, decreasing, peaking, you'll start to see that like rise in estrogen around your ovulation. So it's not like on day ovulation you just have this random spike. It's like there's a cyclic cycle of it coming up, coming down.
Yeah. So like a little window around, you got a
You
little
have a
bubble.
window around
Yeah.
ovulation. It's not like only one day you feel flirty and sexy and you're like, I gotta leverage the one day.
Yeah. What window do you work with? Like, do you say it's maybe like 4 days total? Like, what tends to feel good for you?
Yeah, I think like around like for me at least, I know 4 to 5 days before I actually ovulate, I'm like, okay, I start to feel that really surge where my body's like, hey, we're sexy, we're
Yeah.
feeling good. And then like right after ovulation, I'd say maybe like 1 to 2 days after, I'm like, okay, then it starts. Then you start that trend towards your luteal phase, where again you're getting, you're moving towards menstruation again. So it's not uncommon to see energy start to decrease again. And then we're focusing a lot more on being a little bit deeper, a little bit more emotional as well. And then tapping back into your body, not like you're not throughout the cycle, but more so tapping into feelings in your body itself during the luteal.
Got it. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Okay, so like the end of the follicular, you're feeling on fire, you're feeling great. Some of the symptoms associated with ovulation, boom, you
Yeah.
ovulate, and a couple days after that, you're still feeling on fire. Maybe about a week around then, and then after a couple days after ovulation, we start to go into luteal, and luteal is when things start to do like power down,
Well,
right?
when I mentioned things like when I was talking about like instances like in your professional life, or if you're a content creator, like me, that's when I have everything good to go. I'm just wrapping things up. Think about it like a wrap up. We're
Mm,
wrapping things up. We are editing content, or we're doing finalizing or wrapping up certain projects, or
mhm.
like our physical fitness. It's like, okay, now we might want to start slowing down just a little bit. So adjusting intensity with your workouts again to accommodate for maybe some energy fluctuations, again to just remind yourself that again it's cyclic.
Yeah, I love that. So, for those last 2 weeks, if you are starting to feel a little bit more tired, or if you're starting to feel like that physical energy isn't quite as abundant, isn't quite as vital as it felt at that one point in the cycle, it does not mean anything's wrong with you. Of course, listen to your body about any extremes if something feels like it's not right, but it does tend to sort of settle in a little bit on those last couple weeks. What's really interesting about that phase in a lunar cycle, so we would call that the waning phase, right? And that part of the cycle tends to be with, okay, after the full moon, things became clear. They were illuminated. The tension of the moon and the sun made like, yes, I get it. The flower bloomed, right? And then from that point on, you're like integrating the lessons and you're integrating in the pinnacle of whatever you were creating and of that life cycle. So that can mean like kind of doing that detailed file away work, kind of get things in order kind of work. That can be helping and supporting and giving advice to other people and holding space for them. That can be reflecting. And whatever that means for you to start integrating, that can also mean letting things go, right? Maybe it's like later stages or the implications of what you saw you needed to let go at the time of the full moon, right? Like you saw what wasn't working. And so that waning period as you're heading back to a new moon is okay. I'm really like letting the old leaves fall off the tree, so to speak, right? Like, and it's like allowing and settling into your center with everything that you've learned and with the experience of having created it. So that makes a lot of sense that that would share some themes with that luteal phase and the kinds of ways that we would feel in our body.
Yeah. Do you like even like us like wrapping this up? I think like I hope the listeners are like now feeling this like it's so beautiful.
It's so
Like
beautiful.
we get to experience this and we are so blessed and lucky to say like we can be so connected to ourselves in this way. And how beautiful is that? Like taking back the power from a fucking menstrual cycle to my cycle.
Literally a cycle of life, a cycle of creation. Like we get to learn what it really means to create something through our own body's energy. And our body's energy wants to help us in creating that. So taking some cues from what our body is doing as it's cycling. And
Yeah.
that is freaking beautiful, people. It's beautiful. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody about what kinds of activities in your life you could align to each of these phases. And the last thing I'll say too, it's very interesting to look up where your menstrual cycle falls in the actual lunar cycles. So they have different names for if you do in fact menstruate on a new moon, what that is called and like the spiritual meaning behind that, or what it's called when you menstruate on the first quarter moon, or if you menstruate on the full moon, or if you menstruate around the last quarter. Like there's like a spiritual meaning about like what you uniquely are experiencing. It's fascinating to look into. But again, my explanation today was not that if you're not menstruating on the new moon, it's wrong. No, it's just like connecting the two concepts to help us understand them better. So you guys will have to let us know your thoughts and your aha moments in our DMs after you listen to this. And hopefully you're just feeling way more empowered and feeling very grateful for all the things that make you a woman. Thank you again for coming on the podcast today. If people love your perspective, if they're really interested in seeing what you have to offer, where can they find you, Coach Hannie?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, and I'm always on Instagram, though I do caution everybody. I say social media detoxes are needed, so you better be doing that. So I'm on Instagram. I'm at Hannie, HANNIE.fit. You can go to my website, which is hanniefit.com. But if you ever want to have conversations or learn more about my program, Happy Hormones with Hannie, you can just send me a DM.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming back and talking all about tapping into the magic of our cycle, increasing our body literacy, and creating more harmony with our hormones. I hope everybody has a wonderful week, and I'll catch you next Monday for more breakthroughs. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode and for tuning in to Breakthroughs with Bree. Please share your favorite episodes with your friends and loved ones, and please like, subscribe, and rate the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it, as it helps me continue to create these episodes to help support your breakthroughs. I would love to stay connected with you, so please follow me on social media at Healing with Bree. Please check out my website at healingwithbree.net, which will always have the most up-to-date information about the services that I'm currently offering. And please consider using the link in the show descriptions to subscribe to my email list so you can be the first to hear about any offerings. You can get all of the free resources that I offer, as well as get my weekly channeled messages. My deepest love and gratitude to you, and I can't wait to have more breakthroughs with you next week.